Hello, everyone. We've got Dr. Daniel Farb, the founder and CEO of Flower Turbines, and his plan to prevent climate change. You don't want to miss this episode. This is going to be a good one. Stick around.
Welcome to the Your Mark on the World show with your champion of social good, Devin D. Thorpe.
This episode is made possible via the support of our sponsors, including Johnson & Johnson's Caring Crowd. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be on.
Well, it's exciting for me. I saw your technology on StartEngine and was really excited to talk to you. What you're doing is important and cool and exciting and beautiful. Tell us a little bit about what Flower Turbines is.
So Flower Turbines is a small wind turbine company, and we call it Flower because I envision the products as combining beautiful industrial design with real hard science, significant science and aerodynamics behind it. And,
so what you created are turbines that look like flowers that you stick on your roof, right?
Exactly. Our main one is what we call the Tulip. And people will look at it for a long time, just fascinated by how it changes shape as it revolves. But again, it's not just the change in shape, it's not just the appearance, even though the appearance is really worth money because A, people like to buy it, and B, it makes zoning easier. But there's real science behind it in terms of making that type of turbine much more efficient than it was in the past.
It is exciting because it seems to me that what you've created is something that you could literally put on your house or in your backyard, right?
Exactly. We wanted to make it so it's beautiful, and even if you own a magnificent house in the Hamptons or Martha's Vineyard or one of those places, that you'd be proud to have a wind turbine there. And of course, if you're not in those places, you could also enjoy it. People really tell me that they enjoy the appearance. And part of that is also, it's in a sense what I hope a market breakthrough, in addition to the scientific breakthroughs that are the basis of it. Because, in the old days, people used to just get sneakers. But now they've got all sorts of things on them. They've got ones that light up lights when you walk, or they have a nice color design. It doesn't hurt. People like having that. They like the pride of ownership. It's like when you buy a house, you don't just buy a container with money. So that is certainly part of it, and we enjoy this part of it, but it's not the only thing. We're trying to do not just a market innovation in terms of how it looks, but a market innovation in terms of the efficiency and in terms of the science and the mass production.
It really is a beautiful technology, but it's really practical as well. From reading some of your materials, I think you believe that it can be as cost efficient as rooftop solar. Is that right?
Right. Well, and in areas where there's a good wind resource, even more. You see, it isn't just a comparison of one is good, the other is bad. Is each one appropriate for the kind of environment that you're in? A place like Arizona, except in a few places, has very little wind, but it's got a lot of sunshine, a lot of sunny days. So I would be an imposter if I told you, put up solar in Arizona.
Yeah.
But in the same way, wind is such a bigger resource than solar, is that you'd be unfair to not put wind up there. And then there are places where both works, like on many of the coasts, because coastal areas tend to have good wind, and in the southern part of the United States, you tend to have good solar as well. So It really depends, and that's why I wouldn't necessarily compare it, but if we are going to compare it, basically what I'm trying to do is make wind as attractive as solar has become. And solar had a head start because solar is now mass produced in China. It's been out there for a while, and there have been technology problems with small wind that were really unsurmountable until I started doing the work that I'm doing.
What were those challenges and how did you overcome them?
So basically, it was having a vision that there was a way in which I could try to make this work and try to make it work in a way that wind energy would not be taking away land from agriculture and it wouldn't be taking away land from housing, which means basically rooftops and tight spaces. So I started thinking scientifically of many ways in which I could accomplish that. And the biggest one, there are several innovations here, but the biggest innovation is what I call the cluster effect. The cluster effect means that when you place two turbines together at the right distance from each other, and the turbines are constructed in a certain way, is at exactly the right point, the amount of power produced by them shoots up because one turbine is sending streams of air into the adjacent turbine. So what that means is a real complete change in the business model as well as the scientific model. Because before, wind turbines interfere with each other aerodynamically. Means that you have to put one here, one there, one there. It's hard to make it cost effective. In solar, they don't interfere with each other, so you can place them right next to each other. So that makes everything much more cost effective. Now that we can place turbines close together at the right distance and even make them perform better than they would individually, in a sense, we're one up on what solar can do because we're making better use of the wind flows that exist. So that is the major change that changes the cost effectiveness of rooftop wind, or not necessarily rooftop, it can be on the ground level, but ground level near people, near buildings, confined spaces where you have a limited amount of space, that this is a real step forward. And in an increasingly small world, this is something that's very important.
It seems like there is real potential in urban areas for this application. My observation is that in real, genuine urban environments where you have a lot of high rises, that there is a natural wind tunnel effect that is created by the buildings, and that between and among the buildings there is an opportunity for small scale, wind to sort of populate our cities. Does that make sense to you?
It certainly does. And of course, the variation in heights of buildings can be a disturbing factor as well as a positive factor. So it becomes very location specific in some cities. But if you have open spaces, let's say places in the Midwest, maybe where no building is more than 2 to 3 stories high, it's very open, and the amount of interference from other buildings would be very low. Now, if you go to a place like New York City, it would be very high because you can have one building completely block another, and you can have other buildings forming wind tunnels into each other. So there it becomes a very localized question. But for sure, if one of them is open and not surrounded by buildings that block, you're very likely to have a very good situation, especially in the heights, the higher up you go.
Interesting. Well, it is a fascinating question. So your company's relatively young, and you are now running a crowdfunding campaign for investment dollars under Regulation CF here in the United States on StartEngine, right?
Right.
Tell us what you can about that offering.
So, I'm saying so with the caution that I might say something inadvertently that I'm not supposed to say because there are all these regulations. But I will say that I've been very happy with the advent of crowdfunding. I think it opens up new sources of capital. I've put a lot of my own personal money into this because I believe in it and I know it works scientifically. But it's sometimes hard to interest in investment funds or venture capitalists whose eyes are more on something digital that doesn't have anything physical as a part of it, to go for something like this, no matter how disruptive it is. So I found that your average person is somebody that appreciates the value and the importance of green energy and wants to do something about it and would also like to make money. And I believe we're going to make a lot of money with this. As the SEC would tell me, I also have to say there's significant risks. But the point is, I believe very much in what I'm doing, and I like the idea of opening it up to the general person who really believes in this and wants a chance to do something about it. And usually in the past, before you had things like equity crowdfunding, there weren't these kinds of opportunities. And I just want to say, I don't have any stock in them, but StartEngine has been very entrepreneur friendly, and I've been finding it's been a very good platform to work with.
That's great. There are some competitors in this space. What do you see as being the advantages of flower turbines over the competitors?
Okay, so we're getting to a very big topic because there are hundreds, really hundreds, of small wind turbine manufacturers, but none of them have really gotten market dominance. So first of all, let's exclude the horizontal axis wind turbines, the ones that go in the middle of fields. It's a completely different market. They are more efficient than what I have to offer, but that's because they can be in the middle of the field. You don't care about the noise. You don't care about the fact that they may require more maintenance. They're a different market. So within the vertical axis market, there's drag and lift types. So lift types are like the horizontal axis in that they cause turbulence because lift is like an airplane wing. It causes turbulence around it. And those are, again, more made for fields than they are to be put on a building or near people. So then we're getting to the category of drag vertical axis turbines. Now, traditionally, they've been the least efficient of these groups of turbines, but we've done a number of things that have increased their efficiency. I'll just list a couple of them. One is that you pay close attention to something, a scientific thing. I'll just say the name and then we'll go on. Called the tip speed ratio. Basically, the speed at which it rotates is related to its size and a number of other things that relate to its efficiency. Something that's a little bit easier to understand is that we've discovered something new, that when you divide up the areas of the trailing part of the blades, the part that absorbs the wind, aerodynamically, is that you make a big efficiency increase of around 20% by segregating these different layers of wind after they hit the turbine, so they don't hit the turbine and go to the side and interfere with each other. So that's one thing that we've done. And we've added a unique shape of double curve that has several aerodynamic effects that we'll skip going into the details on. And when you design the turbine in a certain way, you make it eligible for this cluster effect. So these are a couple of things that we've done scientifically that mean that the turbines now start at 1.2 meters per second, as opposed to most wind turbines, which start at 3 meters per second. It means that we have a leg up on everybody else in picking up the lower winds. There's not that much energy in those lower winds, but the fact that we can pick them up means that we get an extra maybe 10% of energy before the others have even started. And then after that, by doing these different things that increase the efficiency and the cost effectiveness, and the cost effectiveness is very much influenced by being able to put many of these close to each other, is that we have something that makes small drag vertical axis wind much more efficient and much more doable than it was in the past. So none of the competition has these things, some of which are patented and some of which are copyrighted, so that we have a serious advantage over others that might want to come into this space.
Well, it's very, very exciting. What you're doing, it has the potential really to change the urban landscape in some exciting ways, and allowing people to generate electricity where they are. And that distributed electricity, of course, has an inherent cost savings. If you generate it where you use it, all the distribution and transmission costs are avoided, and those are significant, aren't they?
They certainly are, and that's one thing that it's important to explain to people. Sometimes people tell me, well, they're generating wind power in Texas for 3 cents a kilowatt hour, but that doesn't stop the utility from adding on 10 cents, and I mean, I'm sure some of it is justified, or even more than that in terms of distribution costs. And, they have to keep your lines up, they have to bill you, they have to do all these things. And also, if you use it at the source, you don't get the taxes that every state puts on you. If you ever look at your electric bill and you see that there's an access tax, a poor people's energy tax, this tax, that tax, they've added a lot of taxes onto these things. And if you're producing your own energy, you don't have to pay those taxes. So you don't have to pay the distribution, and you don't have to pay the taxes. So depending upon where you live, and it's all a combination of the cost of energy and the amount of wind that you have as a resource, but it can, just because there's a wind turbine in Texas producing energy at 3 cents a kilowatt hour, doesn't mean that you couldn't benefit from this.
Yeah, but it's fascinating stuff. What are you most proud of having accomplished, Daniel?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. So I think I'm proud of doing something that can really be a benefit to most of the world, and at the same time have the potential of making a lot of money from it. I'm one of those people who's a little bit of a mission-driven type of person. I grew up in a home where my father was one of the original, he's a writer, original popularizers, of the conservation movement in the United States. And so I grew up with a real sense of importance about conserving nature, protecting the environment. And, even if you don't believe in climate change, there's definitely pollution around, and this definitely helps cut down on pollution. So I feel that I'm doing something significant, and at the same time, I'm going to bring something to market that's going to benefit people by making a lot of people money, hopefully, and also at the same time having a significant effect on the environment.
Daniel, what's the most important lesson you've learned over your career?
Boy, I've learned a lot. Really a lot. In terms of lessons I've learned with this, I would say that you have to stay on top of the people that work for you. Because at one point, one of the people who's working for me, who was a real expert in manufacturing, insisted that we could only make these out of fiberglass, and that's very expensive. But I kept asking around, and we're going to make the next batch out of aluminum with a composite outside that will enable you to add all sorts of interesting color schemes and will also protect from the weather. So, that's one important thing. I think another important thing is if you believe in what you're doing and you know it works, don't listen to people who tell you it won't.
Yeah, there you go. Great tip. You obviously are a bright guy and you could be doing anything. Why did you feel like wind turbines was such an important thing for you to work on, that you devoted your time to this project?
Because it's clean and it has the real potential of maybe providing up to 5% of the amount of electricity in a number of markets around the world. And you need this. You need all types of renewables. So I think the fact that it was needed and the fact that it would do good. A lot of people are very surprised to hear that I'm a medical doctor, not a physicist or a PhD in engineering. And I think the same kind of thing motivated me to become a doctor. And it was that I could do good at the same time that I was making a living. And that's something that's important to me. I'll just add is that I think that the fact that we're burning fossil fuels is a real tragedy, because we need those sources of carbon to make lots of things we need in medicines and all sorts of other useful things, other types of plastics, and to just burn it and let it go up in smoke and pollute the air even, when we should be saving them for the many important uses in synthetic chemicals and pharmaceuticals and so forth, to me is a tragedy. And that ties in a little bit with what I've done, is that I really believe in the value of the solution, not just for energy, but for other things as well.
Daniel, what is your superpower?
What do you mean by superpower? I'm not a Superman, but I'm motivated, and maybe I was blessed with a little bit of intelligence, but you don't do anything with it unless you work hard and are committed.
Excellent. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I really appreciate your time, your insights. Before you go, I wonder if you would take just a minute and tell us how people can learn more about what you're doing and how they can connect with you personally and how they can find your offering on StartEngine.
So that's really important. I appreciate your mentioning that. If you go to StartEngine.com, and I think it's /flower turbines, but at any rate, on that platform, you can look for flower turbines, and that's where you can read the materials and decide to make an investment. And I'd really appreciate it if you could. We've been doing very well. We've already raised over $130,000, and we've increased the raise from 107,000 to over $1 million. And we'd really like to hit that, because that will give us a lot of options in terms of the kinds of things that we can do to get this onto the market faster. So that's the best way to get hold of me. And when you go to that site, it also gives you an opportunity to ask questions. So you can, if there's something that you don't understand, go to the part where you can ask a question, and I'll get back to you about it.
Fantastic. Well, Daniel, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We wish you every success in bringing these flower turbines to market.
Yeah, and thank you for making a forum like this.
All righty. Let's do some good.
At Caring Crowd, we believe everyone has the power to make a difference. Through our crowdfunding platform for community health, we empower passionate people to drive real change. Whether you work for a nonprofit organization, volunteer, or want to get involved for the first time, you can post a campaign on Caring Crowd. Join us, because caring is where change begins.
Thank you for listening. Devin Thorpe's mission is to end extreme poverty, improve global health, and and mitigate climate change before 2045 by finding and sharing the stories of those who are doing the most good. You can join with other listeners to accelerate Devin's mission by visiting helpdevin.org right now.